TLDR, your shortcut to bestsellers.
All right, today we're jumping into a really important book by social psychologist Jonathan Haidt called The Anxious Generation. It's all about a massive shift in childhood that he believes is causing a huge mental health crisis for young people. So let's get right into the evidence he presents.
Haidt kicks things off with a pretty wild question. Imagine this. A billionaire tells you he's starting a colony on Mars and he wants your 10-year-old to go. He says, don't worry, kids are great at adapting to new environments like low gravity. But there's a catch. No one really knows the long-term effects of Martian radiation or low gravity on a kid's brain. So would you let them go?
I mean, obviously you'd say no, right? It's way too risky. But this is Haidt's whole point. We've already done something just like that to an entire generation. Not by sending them to another planet, but by sending them into a new kind of virtual world. We traded a normal, play-based childhood for a phone-based one, and we did it without thinking about the consequences at all.
So to really get what he's talking about, you have to start with the evidence. The whole story really begins with a huge mystery, a sudden, sharp, and worldwide drop in teenage mental health that kicked off about a decade ago.
Just look at the shape of these graphs. For years, depression rates in teens were pretty flat, pretty stable. Then, right around 2012, they just explode upwards. For girls, we see a staggering 145% jump in major depressive episodes. For boys, the increase was even bigger, 161%. This isn't some gradual shift, it's like a switch was flipped.
Now you might be thinking, okay, but maybe kids are just more willing to talk about their feelings now. That's a fair point. But this isn't just about what kids are saying, it's about what they're doing. Hospital records show that ER visits for self-harm by young girls, we're talking 10 to 14 years old, almost triple during that same time. That's hard, verifiable data.
And then, tragically, we see the same terrifying pattern in the worst possible outcome. After decades of staying in a pretty stable range, the suicide rate for young teenagers started to climb in the late 2000s and then just surged after 2010. The evidence is overwhelming. Something profound and terrible happened to young people in the early 2010s. The big question is, what was it?
So what happened? This is where it gets interesting. Kind of like a detective story. We have to start by investigating the usual suspects. Was it the economy? Was it politics? Or just a scary state of the world?
First up, the most obvious one, the economy, right? Gen Z grew up in the wake of the 2008 financial crash, so it makes sense that all that economic anxiety would have an effect on them.
Well, when you look at the data, it tells the exact opposite story. It's actually a perfect inverse correlation. As the American economy got better and unemployment went down, down, down through the 2010s, teen depression went up, up, up. So we can pretty confidently say the economy wasn't the main cause.
Okay, so if it's not the economy, what about all the other big scary stuff in the world? You know, you hear a lot that kids are anxious because of climate change, political chaos, and school shootings. Surely that's taking a toll.
This theory also doesn't quite hold up under scrutiny. For one, the timing's all wrong. The mental health crisis really took off before a lot of these issues were constant front-page news. The demographics are a bad fit, too. The crisis hit preteen girls the hardest, a group that's usually not deeply obsessed with geopolitics. And you know, past generations have faced enormous threats, world wars, the Cold War, without this kind of collapse. In fact, historically, when we face a big threat together, it can have a rallying effect, bringing people closer and sometimes even lowering suicide rates. People tend to get depressed when they feel alone, not when they're facing a challenge as a group.
So if it wasn't the usual suspects, what was it? Well, Haidt says the answer is what he calls the Great Rewiring, a super fast, fundamental change in the technology that shaped the daily lives of teenagers. Just think about that window between 2010 and 2015. It was like a perfect storm. High-speed internet went everywhere. Smartphones became the norm, not the exception. Social media changed from just keeping up with friends to this constant performance, thanks to like and share buttons. And maybe most importantly, the front-facing camera and the explosion of Instagram turned social life into a 24/7 visual popularity contest. And the result of all this? By 2015, about a quarter of teens said they were online almost constantly. Just a few years later, in 2022, that number had almost doubled to a staggering 46%. This wasn't just a new hobby, it was a total rewiring of their day-to-day existence. You have to let this sink in. Gen Z became the very first generation in human history to go through puberty, that awkward, insecure, deeply social time of life, while carrying a portal in their pocket,
a portal that constantly dragged them out of the real world and into a virtual one that was addictive, performative, and just not designed for a developing brain.
So what did this new phone-based childhood actually look like? And just as importantly, what did it push out of the way?
For pretty much all of history, childhood was, play-based. It was physical. Kids were running around, interacting face-to-face. They learned social skills. They took small risks. They figured out their own problems on the playground. The phone-based childhood just shoves all of that aside and replaces it with virtual interactions. Real play gets swapped out for online performance, where every photo and every thought is curated and judged by peers.
And this completely changed the social rules. The real world is synchronous. You have to deal with people in real time. Relationships take work, and you can't just block someone who sits next to you in class. But the virtual world is mostly asynchronous. It's all text and post. Relationships can feel totally disposable. It's so easy to connect and just as easy to disconnect. And if you grow up in that world, you might not build the skills you need for real, messy, lasting relationships.
Okay, but for this whole theory to really stick, it can't just be an American thing, right? If technology is the bad guy here, then we should be seeing these same trends in other countries that got smartphones around the same time.
And, well, that is exactly what we find. Take a look at Canada. They have a different economy, different politics, different healthcare system, but their young people saw the exact same nosedive. Look at this chart of self-reported mental health. After 2011, it just goes into a free fall for young women, while it stays completely flat for older people.
It's the same story over in the United Kingdom. This graph of self-harm episodes. Look familiar? It's almost a carbon copy of the data from the US. It's that same hockey stick shape, starting at the exact same time. The cause had to be something that could cross borders as easily as a software update.
And this pattern just keeps repeating. We see it in Australia, New Zealand, all across the Nordic countries. It's an international tidal wave of mental health problems that perfectly tracks the arrival of the phone-based childhood. The evidence all points to a global cause, not a local one.
And that brings us right to Haidt's main argument, his big explanation for this whole crisis. He says it's two things happening at once. For decades, we've been overprotecting kids in the real world, not letting them play outside, walk to school, or handle their own problems. And at the exact same time, we underprotected them in the virtual world. We just handed them these powerful devices with zero supervision and no guardrails. That combination, he argues, is the perfect recipe for creating an anxious generation.
So this leaves us with a really tough and urgent question. We basically sent our kids to a new planet without a flight plan, and now we're seeing the fallout. Knowing everything we know now, how do we correct the course? How do we fix this deep mismatch between childhood and the world we've built and bring our kids back down to Earth?